Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Moon origin. Origin of the Moon. See also the Destroyer Comet. Contact Report 005. The flood 10,079 years ago, related to the year 1975, was caused by a gigantic comet, which has already caused a lot of damage and has been traversing the universe since time immemorial. We call it the Destroyer, and we know that it has already been racing through outer space for millions of years. Sure, but I am not finished yet, because I want to tell you even more primordial things now. The prehistory of this comet so fateful for the Earth, which also brought the satellite, the Moon over here, the fragment of a small planet from a very distant solar system. The Earth's moon, which originates from a small planet 4.5 million years older than the Earth. It was millions of years ago. Deep in the unknown space, in a space-time shifted solar system of the Milky Way, a solitary star floated far away from the normal orbits of the satellites orbiting the Sun. It was a dark star, devoid of any life, very dangerous in its unpredictable path, into which it had been flung by an immense eruption of its original sun. This was when its original sun burst through all shaking explosions and, in its destruction, partially destroyed the satellites orbiting it or hurled them as dangerous projectiles into the dark space. The sun itself then collapsed into itself and tore a hole in the outer space. Its material pressed itself together with monstrous gavolt and was compressed into a small mass. While the sun, in its normal pulsating state, had a diameter of 11 million kilometers, it now shrank down to a concentration of only 4.2 kilometers. As a result, the material was compressed in such a way that a single cubic centimeter weighed several thousand tons. Since then, it has hovered in space as a dark, gaping hollow, which tears everything within millions of kilometers of its perimeter into itself, whatever it is capable of seizing, and what falls under its spell. The dark star, which got flung away by it at that time, got caught again in a neighboring solar system and orbited it in an unpredictable path. In the field of the force of the huge sun, it orbited the sun's satellites for many millennia, as well as the sun itself, testifying to the fact that it would sometime cause a catastrophe to fall upon the system. Yet still far away from the actual worlds, the dark planet, bare of any life, roamed through space. Powerfully and unapproachably, it drifted through the icy cold of the universe, as an outcast, as a wandering planet, as a stranger in a foreign system, dark, dangerous, and deadly. Within the hold of the far outstretched force arms of the sun, it came closer and closer over the course of thousands of years to the actual area of the system of satellites, which it had already been orbiting for such a long time at an ever-increasing speed. Imperceptibly, however, its course always became narrower and narrower, and year by year the extent of its danger grew. After the thousands of years, it then rushed suddenly and unexpectedly into the closest sphere of influence of the sun and its planets. Like a greedy monster, it emerged from the blackness of the universe and announced deadly destruction. Initially, it was only like a silhouette out of nowhere, but then it was recognized in a hazy and blurred way as a half-dark round disk. Now already illuminated by the reflecting rays of the sun, it approached the orbit of the outermost planet at tremendous speed. But it was still millions of units away from the actual hearth of the peaceful calm, which, though due to its gigantic size, it soon had to transform into a seething hell once it penetrated into the silence of this harmony. But still, some time went by at first, until the giant finally strayed from his path and had moved into the most dangerous proximity. Now already recognizable as a round sphere, the destroyer reflected the sunlight while dragging a fine veil of luminous particles behind it. Still only a few hundred units away from the next worlds, it evoked hellish storms in these, which destroyed large areas that had been cultivated by the human beings peacefully emerging there. With trembling for their arduously gained goods and their already hard lives, they suddenly found themselves exposed to the immense and uncompassionate forces of the universe. Helpless, doomed to be handed over from life to death, they stared out into the sky, to the gigantic wandering planet which raced towards them as a cosmic mortal projectile. It was no more than a question of time before the forces of the cosmos had to unfold their monstrous powers. On the night of the third day after the incursion of the destroyer into the planetary pathways, the middle of the night may just have passed. The drifter from outer space entered the elliptical orbit of the sixth planet. Causing immense cosmic storms, it flung the planet belonging to the orbit a few units off its direction and brought it on a dangerous course towards the sun. Monstrous eruptions and storms tore apart the peaceful appearance of the planet thriving in its magnificence. Letting mountains collapse and casting seas out of their beds, it sought a new path around its sun for itself. Full of horror and consternation over the immense forces of nature, the human beings fled into the vast plains that covered the planet in great numbers, but the unleashed forces of nature were stronger than the will and the saving idea of the human beings. 2/3 of the humankind that inhabited the planet was killed and destroyed in the unleashed hell of nature. Wild waters tore away large parts of the mainland, while exploding volcanoes buried vast areas beneath glowing lava and turned them to rubble and ashes. The planet's daily rotation time doubled, and it circumnavigated the sun in the opposite direction. Forced by cosmic determinations, the survivors had to find a new beginning, devoid of any culture, set back to a primordial time of the development. The destroyer, however, continued racing through the system, spreading hell, death, and destruction. It crossed the path of the fifth planet, a world that was about to give birth to first life. Fortunately, at the time of the event, the latter was too far away from the point of crossing its orbital path to be seriously affected. Apart from mighty storms and minor quakes on land and at sea, there were no notable incidents on it. The fourth satellite of the system, however, would find its destruction in the Battle of the Worlds. As the smallest of all satellites, it stoically traversed its orbit. And from the perspective of anticipatory calculations, it had to cross the flight path of the Wanderer exactly when facing it head-on. And that's exactly what happened. It got into the irresistible destructive power of the giant. Like two wild monsters, the two planets raced towards each other, a giant and a dwarf. But before both of them could collide, immense explosions tore the lifeless dead dwarf planet apart. Its fragments were hurled out into the endless expanses of outer space, where they were captured as shooting stars or meteors by the forces of other stars and, burning up in their atmospheres, found their final end. Further parts of the dwarf were torn into the sun and were atomized. Other parts were torn into the destroyer and became there a part of itself. As if hurled by a giant's fist, one half of the dwarf planet shot away and through, a dimensional gate created by the hands of highly developed human beings into the unending expanses of the Milky Way's space towards a very distant target. Several times on its path, it got into the realm of suns and planets, was shaken, was hit by meteors and shooting stars, and thereby changed its shape. Already, after a few centuries, it had reached an angular, roundish shape. It was dead and barren, however, covered by many small as well as huge, deep craters, and was incapable of supporting life. By the forces of various systems, its speed was gradually slowed down, and it changed its course several times, until one day it was attracted by the sun of a system and broke into its sphere of influence. As dark, dead planet, it traversed all planetary orbits of the outer rings without causing any damage. It was not until the inner rings that it collided with some fragments of a destroyed planet, which nevertheless only tore deep craters into it. However, this caused its course to change once again slightly, with the result that it was driven parallel to the orbit of the second planet, which was already creating its first primitive life. A planet covered by large seas and dense primeval forests, primordial, deadly, and yet gruesomely fantastic. From this point in time, only 34 days were still to pass before the dwarf caught up with the planet, namely the Earth, and was held captive by it. The forces of the planet were sufficient to bind the dwarf to itself and let it circle around itself as a new satellite on an ever-changing elliptical path. Since then, it has orbited the Earth as moon, 4.5 million years older than its mother celestial body.
Contact Report 029.
Millions of years ago, a giant dark star in another space-time configuration destroyed half a planetary system in many light years' distance from the earthly system. After the destruction of that distant system, the wanderer rushed out into the vastness of space, entered the space-time structure of the Milky Way of the Dern universe, and set course for Earth. By large and small planets and by the sun, it was forced into a new course, which consequently had to bring it again and again into the Sol system. Known as the Destroyer, it stubbornly followed its new course and over the course of millions of years created a firm path for itself. But this orbit often led the Destroyer uncontrollably to planetary systems or other wandering stars or comets, which were pushed off course by its gigantic size or attracted by its attraction and destroyed or abducted.
Contact Report 150.
The original point of origin of the destroyer is unknown to us, which is why I can only give details on where it found its way into the Sol system. Its origin lies in the old Lyra system where, from time immemorial, the dark planet, called Wanderer at that time, wreaked system-wide destruction and had brought the earthly moon on that course which led it to the Sol system and to the Earth. A fact that may seem incredible, fantastic, and an unusual coincidence to many Earth scientists, but which nevertheless corresponds to the truth. The Earth's moon was torn loose by the destroyer many millions of years ago as a fragment of a planet 4 million years older than Earth is, and thrown out into space, heading for the Sol system, where it was then captured by the Earth as a satellite. Meanwhile, the destroyer, after colliding with the planet, followed the path of the planetary fragment much more slowly. This, for reasons unknown to us and as a result of events, we have never been able to clarify. In this connection, we can therefore only employ speculations with regard to similar events that are well known to us, but which do not satisfy us regarding the destroyer and its course to the Sol system behind the planetary fragment, which is why I would not like to explain our relevant thesis more closely, although for us it seems to be the only possibility why the destroyer also found its way to the Sol system, so it cannot be spoken of as a coincidence anymore. The Moon, the former planetary fragment, already joined the Earth as a satellite a few million years ago, while the much slower destroyer that followed it first entered the SOL system about 970,000 years ago, causing a tremendous Earth catastrophe.
Contact Report 207.
Today, I first have a question about your space-time configuration, which is practically another dimension, but which is equally directed to ours and, therefore, is equally material. Our universe is called the Dern universe. How is it with our dimension and your dimension? What do you call these?
We denote your dimension with the term Goran, while we call ours Cirrus.
Aha, and these two dimensions, respectively, these two different space-time configurations, are materially identical in their build-up and existence.
That is of correctness.
And as it stands with the destroyer, then, it would also have to consist of matter, as this is also existent in our space-time configuration, right?
That is also of correctness.
Then another question with regard to Earth's moon. For some time, scientists have maintained that the Earth's moon had its origin in or from the Earth. There is the theory that it had been spun off as an entire block of the Earth, while another theory purports that huge dust clouds, as well as smaller and larger chunks of rock and earth, were spun away from the Earth, and namely by the impact of a massive comet or another planet. The comet or planet involved should have been about as large as the planet Mars, etc. The spun-away material should have collected in the course of time and should have developed into the moon. But in contrast, you explained that the Earth's moon penetrated from your space-time configuration into ours and then into the Sol system, in which it allowed itself then to be captured by the Earth as a satellite.
The assumptions of the terrestrial scientists do not correspond to the truth because the origin of the Earth's moon does not trace back to the Earth and, thus also not to a collision or such with a Mars-sized comet or planet. The moon found its way out of our space-time configuration at an early time and penetrated into yours, after which it was held by the Earth by its force of attraction and orbits around the planet since that time, deviating more and more from the Earth, and it still influences the Earth's rotation today as it did at the very beginning, and thus creates a braking effect.
You have already explained this to me before. But how is it with the matter of the moon? Of what kind is it?
It is, at least in certain parts, the same as the matter of the Earth, but other forms of matter also appear. Also, the isotopic compositions, with respect to oxygen, etc., are largely similar and sometimes even identical with those of earthly matter. Unfortunately, this fact will one day lead to the scientific false diagnosis that the Earth's moon was formed from ejected matter of the Earth.
Contact Report 220.
About the origin of the moon, which drifted many millions of years ago out of your space-time configuration into ours and was captured by the Earth. The earthly scientists have the craziest ideas, one of which is that a large celestial body from the masses of Mars had already collided with the developing Earth in primeval times, by what means a huge piece of the developing Earth from its early days was torn out or ejected from this, in order to circle around the Earth in the end and firmly settle to form the moon. At the same time, it isn't considered with this crazy assertion that if such a chunk would have actually been ejected from the Earth, just by the collision with a Mars-sized space projectile, then this chunk would have been shot so far out into space by the unimaginable force that it would have sought its own way as a wandering planet through the Sol system, and wouldn't have settled around the Earth.
Contact Report 257.
Sim Yase told me pretty much at the beginning of our contacts that the destroyer has been doing his mischief in our solar system since time immemorial and destroyed about 22 million years ago or so old homeworlds of the Lyrans. To my knowledge, however, these lay in a different space-time structure, shifted by a fraction of a second to our space and time. How is it there that the destroyer came after the destruction work with the old Lyran urn into our space-time structure?
The destroyer then broke through a space-time barrier created by the ancient Syrians, as we still use it today, but in a modernized form, as you would say. At that time, these passage or dimensional gates, as we call them, were constructed in such a way that they opened as soon as any object approached. This also happened as the destroyer approached, who, through unfortunate circumstances, came to one of these dimensional gates, shot through and entered this, your space-time continuum, then found his way into this solar system. Today, this would no longer be possible, because our passage gates from one dimension to another or to the Dal universe have already been constructed and secured for several million years in such a way that they are probably constant in one place, but only open in response to very specific impulses emitted by our spacecraft. So today it would no longer be possible for a world body to pass unintentionally through one of our many dimensional gates.
Contact Report 467.
The destroyer, which came out of our space-time structure through a dimensional gate into your space-time structure and caused a lot of trouble in it, which is why we removed it from the Sol system some years ago and made it harmless.
Contact Report 528.
Then another question, this time about the Earth's moon, which looks very different on the backside than on the side facing the Earth. On the backside, everything is covered by plateaus, while on the side facing us, there is somehow a rounded plain full of impact craters. There must be a reason for this. The moon is not from the Earth, as our scientists claim, but from your space-time structure, and it came into our space-time structure as a result of a cosmic catastrophe, and through an artificial dimension gate, where it was held by the gravity of the Earth.
This is indeed the case, as Quetzal explained, and there is also a reason why the back of the Earth's moon is designed differently from the front visible from Earth. When a cosmic catastrophe occurred in our space-time structure at an early time, a second, smaller moon collided with the larger one, which then, as Quetzal explained, found its way to Earth as today's Earth-moon. During the collision, the smaller moon affected one side of the larger moon in such a way that a huge plateau landscape was formed. When this moon was then held by the force of the Earth, its rotation came to a halt, with the side of the plateaus facing away from the Earth and the crater side towards the Earth coming to a standstill.
And how is it possible that the two moons were not shattered in the collision? I do not understand.
They were twin moons rotating around their planet in the same orbit close to each other, the smaller one having a slightly higher speed than the larger one. When the smaller moon was forced into a parallel orbit by the catastrophe caused by a dark planet and thus into the area of the larger moon, a collision was the result. So the smaller moon collided at a slightly higher speed on one side of the larger moon, disintegrated and formed the plateaus, while the other side, which was covered with craters, remained untouched.
Simply and clearly stated, I can imagine something underneath. But what about the craters that you see from Earth? Are there not some that were formed when the satellite, which was found here, was already orbiting the Earth as an Earth-moon?
It would be very strange if this had not happened during all the time of its existence as an Earth satellite.
Contact Report 721.
And the fact that we also brought this teaching to Earth at an early time was due to the fact that our ancestors discovered a natural dimensional gate 22 million years ago by chance, which is located here in the Dern universe about 120 light-years beyond the Pleiades stars known to you. The dimensional gateway was discovered because a moon from our Ankar universe that had drifted from an exploded planet entered the Dern universe through this dimensional gateway, which our ancestors investigated and then found to be Earth's satellite.
Contact Report 838.
I think you mean our Earth-Moon, which our clever astronomers, etc., still claim emerged from the Earth when a huge space projectile crashed into the Earth, and consequently this then created the Moon.
No moon of the planets of this solar system is created in this manner. Universally, I am referring to all 7 universes of the image of the creation in which we exist in one. According to our knowledge, only in the rarest of cases should such occurrences happen that moons emerge from planets, if at all, because in any case, nothing of the kind is known to us. In all 7 universes that we know, but in which we ply Aaron, are only interested in our universe and yours, for the sake of the Earth humans. Because the teaching of Nocodemian was brought here, nothing of this kind is known to us, that a moon has split off from a planet and formed a separate entity revolving around it.
If I remember correctly, yes. The Earth's moon came here about 25 million years ago and settled around the Earth, but one star was nudged away from the Earth's orbit, which today...
About that, I know you are not supposed to say anything, because it is disputed anyway by the earthly experts, as astronomers and the like call themselves.